Today, Marriott is the largest hotel chain on the planet. The name is essentially synonymous with hospitality and reliable comfort away from home. But who started this billion-dollar empire? None other than a sheepherder who started selling soda to save his family from bankruptcy. In 1900, in Marriott, Utah, J. Willard Marriott was born to Hiram Willard Marriott and Ellen Morris Marriott. He was the second of their 8 children, and Bill, as they called him, was a hard worker from the very start. He helped on the family farm throughout his young life, and by the time he was only 14, his father placed him in charge of moving an entire 3,000 sheep herd to San Francisco. Because he had so many responsibilities around the farm, Marriott dropped out from school and worked full-time to help support his large family. Although everything changed when his father went bankrupt, Bill realized that sheep herding and small farming were not the way to succeed, and for anything else, he knew he would need a solid education. With the help of an old teacher, he completed the necessary requirements to finish high school. Then he graduated from Weber College with his associate's degree before going on to get his bachelor's degree from the University of Utah in 1926. During his years in school, Bill still had to work in order to pay his way, and he had several odd jobs, including teaching theology and selling woolen underwear. However, it didn't take long after graduating for Bill Marriott to realize that what he really wanted was to start his own business, though he didn't quite know what that business was going to be. During this time, he remembered his trip through Washington, D.C. when he was returning west from his mission in New England with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And the one memory that stuck with him was that of a peddler walking around in the heat and selling lemonade to overheated tourists, families, and businessmen. But he decided that instead of pushing around a cart, he would set up a stand where people could sit and drink the cool beverage out of the sun. Marriott had also been to one of the popular A&W root beer shops when he was in college, and he knew he wanted to open one in D.C., but first, he needed to get approval to sell A&W. He went all the way to Sacramento to meet with Roy Allen, the then head of the company, and pitched his idea. Luckily, Allen approved his request, and all Bill needed now was a store. Bill Marriott's idea was put into action when he opened his A&W root beer shop in Washington, D.C. in 1927. Bill and his new wife Alice, along with their business partner Hugh Colton, opened the store together. They kept the prices low and worked hard all through the muggy D.C. summers, and at the 9 stools they provided, customers could purchase ice-cold root beer. And only 1 year after opening, they were offering delicious hot food and decided to call the store Hot Shops. Business was booming, and in 1928, only 2 years after they had opened their doors, the Marriotts opened 2 new Hot Shop locations, and one of them was even the first drive-in diner on the East Coast. Over the next 10 years, there were many ups and downs for Hot Shops. While business did well, Hugh Colton decided to sell his shares, and Alice and Bill worked day in and day out, keeping the 3 restaurants running. Soon enough, there were 8 Hot Shops restaurants. And by 1937, Hot Shops even started catering hot box lunches to airline passengers out of Hoover Airport. Bill Marriott was the first person to think of making and delivering hot lunches to planes for the passengers to enjoy during the flight. And as everyone knows, it was a seriously great idea. As well, when the Second World War started in 1939, the business adapted to the needs of the country. They decided they would provide catered food services to government buildings and defense plants around the capital. It's important to understand that during this time of immense growth and innovation, Bill and Alice were going through an extremely tough time in their personal lives. In 1935, Bill had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, a specific type of cancer that moves quickly through the body. The doctors gave him only 6 months to a year to live. It was recommended that Bill and Alice take some time to relax and get away from the stress of building their business. So they left the employees in charge, took their young son, Bill Jr., and headed up the New England coast for a bit of R&R. In an incredibly wonderful but strange turn of events, When they returned, Bill was once again seen by his doctors, and it seemed the disease had all but gone away. Just a few months later, the cancer was completely gone. Although the business model was certainly solid, Marriott claimed that the way he truly expanded and succeeded so quickly was by taking care of his employees to ensure their happiness. In fact, he once said, "You've got to make your employees happy. If the employees are happy, they are going to make the customers happy." In addition to focusing on the happiness of his employees, he also demanded quite a lot from them. Marriott would check every piece of cutlery, the shelves in the pantry, and every other inch of the business when he came through, looking for perfection. Even when the company had hundreds of restaurants and hotels, Marriott would visit each one at least 4 times every year to ensure things were running up to his standards. But because he had created such a community and family culture within the company, his employees respected his perfectionism, were loyal to the family, and tended to work harder to impress him. While it may have been his brush with death or his dedication to his faith within the LDS Church, Bill Marriott certainly had a kindness for his employees that many other businessmen just didn't have. By the 1940s, Alice and Bill Marriott were serving the U.S. government, hundreds of airline passengers, and the American people through their 24 Hot Shop restaurants. But once the 1950s came around, everything changed for Hot Shop and the Marriott family. The first change was not all that great at first. McDonald's came onto the scene, and while it cost Hot Shop 50 cents and 2 minutes to make a burger, it only took McDonald's 15 cents in 2 minutes. So in order to ensure they stayed profitable, Bill decided to sell public shares of the company, of which they sold out after just 2 hours on the market. The second change was a little different and a whole lot riskier. Bill decided that he would open a motel. At the time, passenger planes were flying in and out of Washington, D.C. at an incredible rate, and Bill thought that those passengers would want somewhere close to the airport to stay. By 1957, they had opened their first motel right next to the Washington Hoover Airport, and they called it the Twin Bridges. At the time, it was the largest motel in the world. Although there was no doubt that Bill and Alice were extremely hard workers, they really didn't know anything about the motel business. And while their son, Bill Jr., didn't know much either, they made a family decision that he would take over the motel side of the company. It turned out to be one of the best decisions they ever made. Bill Marriott Jr. had been working alongside his parents for most of his life by the time he took the reins as the head of motels within the company. He had the same work ethic, had received his degree in finance, and wanted to improve the family business as much as his father had. After only 2 years of working at Twin Bridges, Jr. opened a second motel called the Key Bridge Motor Hotel, and this hotel did just as well as the first. Bill Jr.'s model was simple but effective. In addition to offering clean rooms, his hotels had reservation systems, restaurants, and family activities such as ice skating rinks. His father saw how hard he worked for the company and appointed him as the president, and eventually the CEO of Marriott. In the following decade, the family officially changed the name of the now large and wildly successful company to Marriott. They also opened their first international hotel in Acapulco, Mexico in 1967, and partnered with Star Line in 1972 to be the first lodging company to work with cruise lines. And by the 1980s, Marriott had become the #1 hospitality company in the world. Luckily, Jay Willard, or Bill Marriott, was able to see what he, his wife, and his son had created before he passed away in 1985. From growing lettuce and sheep herding in rural Utah to keep a roof over the head of his family, to creating a hospitality empire that was worth millions of dollars and provided thousands of jobs, it's safe to say that Bill Marriott was one of the most successful businessmen of the 20th century. Even though Bill passed away, Marriott didn't stop. In fact, the company continued to grow at an almost unbelievable rate. They expanded their business model and offered their customers hotels in dozens of countries and at almost every price point. Marriott purchased several of their competitors, including Residence Inn, Renaissance Hotel, Execustay, W Hotels, Sheraton, the Ritz-Carlton, and more. And by 2016, when Marriott acquired Starwood Hotels, they officially became the world's largest hotel company. One of the great things about the Marriott chain is that even though they are publicly shared and have dozens of high-powered executives, they are still technically a family business, as David Marriott, Bill Jr.'s son and Bill's grandson, took over as the chairman of the board in 2022. Today, there are more than 8,000 Marriott hotels in over 131 countries. In total, they have 1.5 million rooms to rent on a nightly basis. And top it all off, the company is worth an incredible $50 billion. So the story of the J. Willard Marriott and his family won't be forgotten anytime soon. Hungry for another fascinating business story? Click on the following video to hear the crazy story about the poor single dad who created Lego.